The day my son ordered me to apologize to his father-in-law in front of his wife, I realized that I had made one terrible mistake. I had spent years believing that if you gave your children everything you had, they would always remember the sacrifices you made for them. I was wrong. My name is Daniel. I am 63 years old, a widower and a retired mechanic. My wife, Margaret, passed away 6 years ago after a long illness. Before she died, she made me promise that I would always look after our only son, Ethan. Daniel, she had whispered from her hospital bed, Ethan is all we have left. No matter how old he gets, never let him feel alone. I kept that promise. Even when Ethan moved away for college, I paid his tuition. When he wanted to start his own business, I used the savings I had planned for my retirement to help him. When he got married, I paid for much of the wedding. I never complained. I never asked him to repay me. I only wanted him to be happy. For the first few years of his marriage, everything seemed perfect. His wife, Claire, was polite but distant. Her father, Richard, was wealthy, confident, and used to getting his way. He owned several businesses and had a large house on the edge of town. I was the opposite. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom home, drove an old pickup truck, and still fixed broken appliances for neighbors because I enjoyed helping people. Richard never seemed to like me. He often made little comments about my clothes, my car, or my financial situation. One evening at dinner, he looked at my hands and laughed. "Still working with your hands, Daniel?" "Yes," I replied. "Old habits die hard," he smiled. "I suppose some people never move beyond that." The table became quiet. I looked at Ethan. He said nothing. That silence hurt more than Richard's words, but I ignored it. I told myself that family peace was more important than pride. Then came the night everything changed. Ethan and Claire invited me to their house for dinner. Richard and his wife were there too. We were eating when Richard suddenly started talking about money. "I've been thinking," he said, "Claire and Ethan should move into a better neighborhood. People judge you by the company you keep and the place you live." I put down my fork. "There's nothing wrong with their home." Richard looked at me. "I wasn't asking for your opinion." I felt my face grow warm, but I stayed quiet. Then he continued, "Some people simply don't understand how successful families operate." That was when I finally spoke. "Richard, money doesn't make someone better than everyone else." He leaned back in his chair. "And poverty doesn't make someone morally superior." Ethan looked uncomfortable. Claire stared at her plate. I should have stopped there, but Richard pushed further. "You know, Daniel, Ethan has a future now. He has a wife and responsibilities. He doesn't need to keep being pulled backward by people who refuse to move forward." I knew exactly what he meant. He meant me. I looked at my son. "Ethan." He didn't answer. That silence broke something inside me. I stood up. "I think I should go." I picked up my coat, but before I reached the door, Ethan finally spoke. "Dad, sit down." I turned around. His voice was different, cold, firm. "Apologize to Richard." I thought I had misheard him. "What? You insulted him?" "I didn't insult him. I defended myself." Ethan stood. "Dad, just apologize." I looked at Claire. She looked embarrassed. Richard sat comfortably in his chair, watching me. I shook my head. "No." Ethan's expression hardened. "If you won't apologize, then you can't stay here." I stared at him. "This is your home." "Yes," he said, "and I'm telling you to leave." My heart sank. "Ethan, I'm your father." "I know. And I've done everything I could for you." "I know that too." "Then why are you treating me like a stranger?" He looked away. "Because you're making things difficult for me." I slowly put my coat on. "All right." I walked out. That night I drove home in silence. I cried only after I closed my front door. Not because Richard had insulted me. Not because Ethan had embarrassed me. I cried because my son had looked at me and chosen someone else's approval over his own father's dignity. For several weeks we barely spoke. Then one afternoon Ethan called. "Dad, I need to talk to you." I expected an apology. Instead, he said, "Claire's pregnant." I was silent. Then I smiled through my tears. "That's wonderful. I wanted you to know. I'll always be happy for you." There was a pause. "Dad, yes." "Would you come to dinner?" I almost said no. But then I remembered my promise to Margaret, never let Ethan feel alone, so I went. When I arrived, Claire opened the door. She looked nervous. "Dad," she said softly. I hadn't heard her call me that before. We sat down. Richard was there. He didn't say anything. Ethan looked at me. "I owe you an apology." My heart stopped. He continued. "I was wrong. I didn't speak. I let Richard's money and opinions control me. I was afraid of disappointing him. I thought keeping peace with him was more important than standing up for my own father. Claire began crying. I should have defended you that night, she said. Looked at both of them. Why now? Ethan lowered his head. Because Claire made me understand something. She took my hand. She asked me what kind of father Ethan would become if he taught his child that love means obeying whoever has the most money. I looked at her. She continued. I realized what we did to you was wrong. Richard finally spoke. Daniel, I looked at him. He seemed different, less confident. I owe you an apology too. I said nothing. He sighed. I judged you because you weren't wealthy. I thought that made you less successful than me. He paused. But I watched Ethan after you stopped coming around. Richard looked down. He missed you. That sentence hurt because I had missed my son too. Richard continued. I realized something. A man can own 10 houses and still be poor if his family doesn't respect him. For the first time I saw tears in his eyes. I was wrong. I looked at Ethan. He was crying now. Dad, he said, please forgive me. I took a deep breath. Forgiveness isn't something you demand. I know. It has to be earned. I know. I stood up and walked toward him. Then I hugged my son, not because what he had done was acceptable, but because I didn't want anger to become the final chapter of our story. That evening changed our family. Richard began treating me with respect. Ethan started visiting me every Sunday. And when his daughter was born, he asked me to be the first person outside the hospital to hold her. I remember sitting in that hospital room, holding my tiny granddaughter while Ethan stood beside me. He looked at me and said, Dad, I hope I become half the father you were. I smiled. You don't have to become me, son. He looked confused. Just become the kind of father your daughter will never be afraid to disappoint. He nodded. Years later, when my granddaughter was old enough to understand, she asked me why I had so many old tools in my garage. I told her they belonged to her grandmother's husband. She laughed. Grandpa, that's you. Yes, I said. She hugged me. And in that moment I realized something. Sometimes the people we love hurt us the most. Sometimes children forget who stood beside them when nobody else did. Sometimes pride, money, and social status can blind people to what truly matters. But love doesn't mean allowing people to humiliate you. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending you weren't hurt. And family doesn't mean one person gets to control everyone else. That night, when Ethan told me to apologize or leave his house, I thought I had lost my son forever. I didn't realize I was walking away from an unhealthy relationship so that we could eventually build a better one. I also learned that a parent's greatest sacrifice isn't always giving money, working extra hours, or giving up dreams. Sometimes it's having the courage to walk away without revenge. Sometimes it's leaving the door open without chasing someone through it. And sometimes it's forgiving someone after they finally understand the pain they caused. Today, Ethan still tells people that his father taught him the most important lesson of his life. He says, never make someone prove their love by accepting disrespect. And whenever he says that, I remember the night I drove home alone. I remember sitting in my kitchen, staring at an empty chair where my wife used to sit. I remember whispering, Margaret, I don't know if I did the right thing. And somehow, even after all these years, I can almost hear her answer. You did. Because sometimes walking away isn't giving up on your family. Sometimes walking away is the only way to teach them how to value you.